It doesn't matter if you're a media company, a retail company, or a bank, you need to leverage IT to help innovate and evolve your company, or it will die. Now, technical debt will be a focus in tonight's brawl. It is a metaphor, equates software development to financial debt. Imagine that you have a project that has two potential options. One is quick and easy, but comes with constant fixing, while the other has better design, will take more time to implement. In development, releasing code quickly is like incurring debt. Comes with interest, which for technical debt comes in the form of extra work, which no one wants. While this takes time in the short run, it also decreases future interest in payments.
Yeah, we're very interested in hearing about it. Not over and over and over in a whining voice, but very interested in hearing about it. There is a fundamental question of, are you willing to incur that debt, or for that matter, any other? In my experience, technical organizations tend to overemphasize the pain they feel over the necessity of the overall organization about actually getting something done. My motto is always that something is always better than nothing, and done is always better than perfect.
So I think CEOs definitely should be interested in it. Some, in my experience, some pay it lip service, some ignore it altogether, and the good ones pay attention. I think the important part is that, while you move fast and, like Mark said, if you done is better than perfect, but I've seen too many CEOs that will promise that we'll make things better, we'll fix things right after this release. And instead of the engineer's whiny voice, as Mark puts it, it's the sales teams or the CEOs must push forward. We're gonna win. We're gonna get it all done. I promise you, we'll deal with this tomorrow. I'm still waiting for all those promises from the last decade or so.
You strongly more believe that it should take more time to come up with a better product and push that forward, correct?
I don't think it's quite that simple. I think it's important to be conscious about the trade-offs you're making, but it's important to be honest with yourself and with the rest of your team what the trade-offs are and what you're actually going to do about them. There are plenty of times where, especially when a company is really young and the product is very young, you're trying to figure out what to do, where it makes sense to get things done as quickly as possible. But if you keep running in prototype MVP phase for 5 years, at some point the whole house of cards comes crashing down on you.
For early stages of a company, Mike and I generally agree, because you just have to get something done. But I think from my perspective, once you have an established business, you have to decide which pieces you want to treat with sort of the same commitment to progress that you had at the beginning, and which pieces, you have to take a backseat to getting things done faster and fix some of the problems. And I think that, for a lot of technology organizations, that is actually pretty hard to do, because you end up you're working on multiple projects, and as a developer, you probably have to go, well, here I can take a shortcut, but here I can't. My view of this is that you want to structure organizations so that you have certain people who are capable of, duct tape and bubble gum, and certain people that are really more about, cleaning those things up and fixing them and making them better. Historically, in some of the businesses I've built, we've had this running joke of, we realize that there's this potential problem out there, but it'll be a good problem to have, right? We were like, this won't scale. It'll be a good problem to have when it doesn't scale. And several times we've actually gotten to that point.
If I'm given the opportunity to actually take the time to fix the garbage and move it in the right direction, then it's fine. That's it's the way it should be. Oftentimes that doesn't happen. One of the problems I've run into on a number of occasions is you'll have either a CEO or even an earlier stage head of tech or CIO that is used to cranking out tons of features every day, every week, moving really fast with 3 people, right? And then a couple of years pass and you've accumulated that pile of garbage that's making great money, and you've hired, a 10-person team, and it's moving 5 times slower. And they're like, I don't understand. Why the heck is this, why are we not making any progress? We hired great people, it's great culture, everything's great.
As you said earlier, the duct tape and bubblegum are finally rotting away.
It's really easy if you've got a little bit of crap, you can kind of jump over, but you got a really big pile of crap, wading through it is really slow.
Yeah, it's true though, right? The more people you have, the slower things go, right? And some of that simply has to do with communications overhead. Some of that has to do with those people weren't there at the beginning, so they don't necessarily understand why something is the way it is.
We had a bug in some disclosures that cost us a few $1 million once. That was fun. There are some pieces of code that you have to write right the first time, even if you're trying to go really fast. There are things that have to do with compliance or regulatory disclosures, things like that.
That's true. That's probably an area where, it's taken me many years to learn. Like, you know what, that area right there, just let's do that one right.
Instead of just doing the whole thing, just focus on one smaller part. Is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's progress. 10 years ago, Mark wouldn't have given you even that.
Well, so everybody gets older.
10 years ago, you were more of the let's just get something out there and keep moving, moving. Yeah. So let's focus more on that idea. Was it just, again, this is a new company, you just want to throw something out there? And what maybe slowly made you change? Not completely change.
I was in my 20s, I didn't know any better.
You have to be very explicit about the debt you're taking on, and you have to be honest with yourself and the rest of your team about what the costs are of what you're doing and of the shortcuts you're taking, and when you are going to devote time to pay that debt down. A lot of times I hear people saying, hey, we should devote a week a year or whatever, we'll go and we'll be fixing up technical debt. And I think that's doomed to failure. What you got to do is you have to be constantly taking some of your development capacity and continually improving, continually paying down the technical debt, making improvements, and that way the costs of the debt continue being manageable versus getting to a point where all of a sudden you can't build a new feature because every piece of code that the developer touches breaks something, and they're spending 99% of their time keeping the thing afloat. And I've been through that experience in pretty much every company I've been in.
So if you take slightly the other side of that, one of the things that happens is if that particular line of reasoning becomes acceptable to the organization, developers are smart guys, girls. They pick up on this idea, and they go, "Oh, no! This thing right here that I really want to polish and really rewrite is really, really important, and it's keeping us from doing other stuff." And if you really think about it, it probably isn't, because maybe it's causing them personally some pain, but their own personal pain tends to, in their mind, become much more important to the organization than the reality of the pain that exists for that organization, right? So if you've got somebody that, for everything that they do, it takes them, I don't know, let's say an extra hour or two per feature. So I don't know, let's say they're wasting 20% of their time. And they're like, but this is horrible. I'm wasting 20% of my time on this stuff. But if you take a larger context and you're like, well, so what does that mean? That means my cost, my headcount cost is 20% larger for the organization, but maybe it gets me 50 or 80% more revenue or 200% more revenue, and maybe that's okay. And in my experience, as an organization gets larger, the sort of rank and file developers don't necessarily have the larger context. And they actively, in fact, refuse to get the larger context. Yeah. And that creates a lot of those kinds of issues. They're like, but this is horrible. I'm spending all my time on this, but you're one guy in a team of 20. It's okay.
So do we feel like speed is better then?
You can't say one is better than the other one's better than the other. And that's where the sort of continuous argument comes in, is that you want to be looking and thinking about both sides of that discussion in the context of everything that you do. Having said that, if you actually spend your time doing that, you won't get anything done. So you got to pick your battles, I guess.
Yeah.
So you can talk to a CEO and he can tell you that he wants to have a decent quality product and he's going to be paying down technical debt slower than the developers would like, but he'll do it. But then any given decision that CEOs or salespeople, or even worse, make, they will always say, well, We'll tackle the technical debt next time. This is a really important thing. It's really important for us to get this one last feature out, one product, satisfy this one extra customer, and then we'll tackle all this debt. And if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with worse and worse quality. So the trick is not to do that. The trick is also not to try to go from, hey, I've got an MVP, to, okay, we're going to stop, we're going to rewrite, we're going to do it right. That's the wrong answer for a number of reasons. One is most rewrites fail. Two, you're wasting time not growing the business. I wish we could say, hey, we don't have to fix technical debt, and all it will cost us is an extra 20% in headcount. So as the company grows, as the product grows, you just got that extra 20%. I'll pay that every day, no problem. The problem is that it's going to be 20%, then it's going to be 40%, then it's going to be 50%, and then all of a sudden, one day, you're going to come to a grinding halt, and you're not going to be able to do even the simplest things without spending a bunch of time fixing things. And if you're lucky, it's just that you can't do anything new. Usually what happens is you deploy some minor little feature, and the most crucial money-making feature of the business all of a sudden stops working, and you find out the next day, and then you're scrambling to figure out how to keep the business afloat. And all you did was change the logo on the front page.
And so the people with the utmost skill in modeling and understanding the financial implications of any given debt have no concept about how this piece of debt might impact the business. And the people that understand that piece of debt, the developers can barely manage their checkbook, right? I could spend $1 here, or I could spend $1 here. And those are typical questions for a business to answer, right? Do I spend $1 more on marketing? Do I spend $1 more on customer service? What impact is it going to have? And I think that on the technical debt side, there's a lot of pushback in asking that question and saying, what happens if I spend $1 here? Because to the technical organization, the pain of that technical debt seems so much larger than it truly is to the organization. Now, at some point, Mike's right. It is crippling. But until that point, it's very difficult to quantify it.
I think you bring up a good point. It is definitely a question that gets a lot of pushback. I think part of it is that you either have developers that are too junior to even be able to answer that question, or they've been burned. They've been burned by questions like that one, or hey, if you were just working on this feature, how long would it take you to build it? Great. Now, if you were working just on this feature, how long would it take you to build it? All right, now do all of them. Oh, and how much is your technical debt costing you? Oh, okay, we'll fix it next time. Part of it, right, is that we've done it to ourselves. We're asking what should be a simple question, but it carries with it a lot of baggage.
They like to know that their work is valuable. Well, if you look at any given business, a lot of things you do end up being thrown away, right? And so you, on the one hand, you're like, look, I worked on this and it got thrown away, it must be worthless. But no, there was value in doing that experiment, because if it had worked, right, it might have been worth a lot of money, right? So there's this idea of sort of expected value across a portfolio of projects, right? And what happens is that if you actually want to do a portfolio of projects, it doesn't help to do them all really, really well, because you don't know which one of them is going to succeed, right? So I historically I've invested in a lot of startups. Every one that I've invested in, the day I invested in it, two things. I really loved the idea, I really loved the people, and I wrote my investment down to zero. Because it's actually pretty hard to predict which ones are going to succeed, but some percentage of them are going to. Right, and I think a lot of the development the same way, especially when you're building new stuff, is you're saying, well, I just need to get it to a point where I can test if it's going to make money, and then usually what happens is it starts making money, and you don't want to go back and fix it up. You want to go deeper into that, and you're like, look, if it makes enough money for me to hire another person, that's okay, right? And then when you sort of flatten out, that's when you end up with this, oh my God, what did we build? And then you have to make a decision of, well, is what you're doing ultimately valuable to the business? Because, at some point you might be forking that library and, saying, oh, this is version 5, and, forget those other guys.